Welcome to the Growth Shift. I'm David Zylstra. Here's what I've learned after years in business. Every leader who's built something meaningful has a story about the moment they had to shift, when failure forced innovation, when change became opportunity, when they chose growth over comfort. On this show, we dive into those pivotal moments, the setbacks that became breakthroughs, the strategic shifts that accelerated growth, and the frameworks that turn obstacles into opportunities. Because here's the truth. In a world where change is the only constant, the leaders who thrive aren't the ones who avoid failure. They're the ones who've learned to shift strategically through it. So whether you're facing your own pivot point or just want to learn from someone who's been there, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Today, joining us on the Growth Shift is Daniel Collison. Now, Daniel took an unconventional path into financial services. Armed with degrees in both history and poli-sci, he not only became a top-producing financial advisor, but he spent 20 years teaching MBA students at one of Canada's most prestigious business schools. Now, through Advice to Advisors, he's coaching thousands of financial advisors across North America and Brazil, turning technical expertise into powerful marketing strategies. Today, we're exploring two pivotal encounters completely transformed his approach to both business and life. Daniel, welcome to the Growth Shift.
Thanks very much, David. Great to be here.
Now, tell us a little bit more. How the heck does somebody who has degrees in both history and political science end up being a financial consultant?
A different journey, and certainly one that other advisors took, I'm sure, but I had no intentions of being in the financial services business whatsoever. Didn't study economics, didn't study finances. As you said, history and poli-sci were my degrees, but after graduating my second degree and not finding a job in either political science or history, a friend actually sent me an ad from a paper that was hiring for training for financial planners. He said, you like people, you're probably good in sales, this should work for you. And that's how I fell into it. And that's where I ended up thriving in reality.
Incredible. I mean, it just sounds like, you took an opportunity because you needed one, and it really paved a path for you moving forwards. Let's fast forward a little bit from there. So, you fell into financial advising and you ended up working in Schulich Business School. I mean, tell us a little bit about how that actually even happened.
Yeah, and again, very fortuitous in reality. I met a top producer within the firm I was with, Ian, and he gave me some ideas and concepts that I could use in my business that really took me to the next level because it was all about professionalism, learning how to be better than my competition and how to really take that to market. And it was phenomenal to the point where I started doing seminars and in fact started inviting others to do seminars along with me. And I did that with a couple of finance professors out of Schulich where I ended up teaching. And they in turn looked at what we were doing and what I specifically was doing and asked me if I wanted to teach. At first I thought they were talking undergrads, and I really didn't look and I wasn't looking to get into the teaching space outside of financial planning. So I kind of deferred on that. And then they said, well, it's actually MBAs you'd be teaching, personal financial management. We've got a course curriculum you could look at, you can alter it. So they gave me lots of opportunity and I ended up taking it. And it was probably one of the best things I ever did because it actually forced me to up my game even beyond what I was doing just in the industry. I was dealing with some of the brightest people. Schulich doesn't take students into the MBA program directly from undergrad. So most of the students I had were professionals, a lot of them in finance, some accountants, some doctors. I knew I had to up my game, so I got more into the research of what I had to actually teach, and it just changed a lot of the things I was doing, how I was communicating, how I was bringing across concept and technical information and knowledge ultimately.
So Daniel, you mentioned upping your game here. You also mentioned earlier in your experience, right? You learned a couple of things from a colleague that really changed how it is and perhaps why it is you were doing certain things. But those things, I mean, they sounded pretty basic or generic these days, right? Just a little bit more professionalism, a little bit different positioning. I mean, what really changed for you at that point? What were the eye openers?
Well, the number one was how I surrounded myself with others. And what Ian, the advisor, taught me, and he called it quarterbacking back then, but to act as your client's quarterback to other professionals so that you can bring everything to them. Ultimately, I built a little more around the concept. I came to the idea this really is the personal CFO model. And really what a financial planner, a financial advisor needs to do is act as the personal chief financial officer to their clients, help them qualify and then quantify their financial goals. And secondly, act as the conduit to all the other experts that they'll ever need in their financial space, lawyers, accountants, money managers, insurance specialists, lenders, making sure that you'll never be asked a question that you can't get the answer to. And that was a breakthrough for me because I think I really did suffer from imposter syndrome, coming from a background that had nothing to do with finances. So when Ian pointed out, you just have to know the people who know the stuff, I was allowed to relax, and it gave me huge confidence. And the moment that happened, what I started to see was that it gave my clients huge confidence as well, because whenever a question was asked of me that I didn't know, I'd just say something like, great question, David. Never heard that one before. I'll have the answer, within the next 48 hours. That was a game changer for me.
Incredible. So, I mean, you really broadened what it is you were doing for your clients and acting as a total financial advisor, not just when it comes to, let's say, investments or retirement. You mentioned that you were facing imposter syndrome at that time. I mean, even I'm sure when you were going through that growth and making these changes, it sounds like maybe that was something that you were struggling with, as many people do. Is there anything else that happened along the way to really help you break out of that imposter syndrome? Because I mean, like, you also went into Schulich then, and you realized, hey, I need to upskill again here.
Totally.
I mean, what really helped you get through that imposter syndrome ultimately?
Yeah, great question, because what happened at Schulich was I started recognizing I was teaching something that I was quite comfortable in teaching to very intelligent people, but they were totally out of the industry itself. So I had to turn everything I did into processes. So a tax planning process, risk management process, estate planning process. And I started to do that. And at that point, I thought, this should be in a book. And that's how I came about building and ultimately writing my first book, The Financial Advisor's Guide to Excellence.
Amazing, amazing. Now, I just want to touch on this just a little bit more when it comes to imposter syndrome, because I think it's something that many people struggle with, and maybe some think that, oh, I'll get over this eventually, like I'll get beyond that. But at the same time, if you're a true student of life, as many entrepreneurs and high-level executives are, you realize that you always need to continue learning, always need to put yourself out of your comfort zone to achieve that. So when we look at these side by side, it almost seems like imposter syndrome is something that no one will ever escape. I mean, how do you wrap your head around that and feeling that, or recognizing that just because you're uncomfortable in something doesn't mean you're an imposter? Right? What's maybe an approach that you would take if you encounter that?
Yeah, and second point I got from Ian, the top producer, was focus on an ideal client. He dealt with business owners at the time, and I was slowly drifting more into dealing with retirees. And when he said, focus, I took that to heart, and I really focused. Everything to do with retirement planning, tax planning for retirees, and ultimately estate planning. I put a laser focus on learning that. I didn't have to learn anything else. It was that ideal client, the retiree, pre-retiree. I focused on that cohort. I learned what I had to learn about them, not just technically, but their lives. And that's where my history and political science came in. I knew what these people had lived. I'd studied their generations and those before them. And I always say, just as you did, you have to be a student of the business. But my belief is you have to become a PhD of your ideal client. And that's what PhDs do in the world of academia. It's this laser focus on a small, specialized bit of knowledge. And if you do that with your ideal client, you can quickly drop off that imposter syndrome. And then I bring back that idea of having other people supporting you in the knowledge that you can't have. I know I can't know everything on tax, on risk management, on investments. I can't know it all. Here's the thing, the research tells us that consumers don't believe that their financial advisors know everything either. So knowing that, and that actually erodes trust when you try and suggest that you know it all. They actually have more trust in you when you admit to the things you don't know, but you can lead them to the ultimate conclusion through others. That was a game changer, and that's where the imposter syndrome, so that combination of the industry and then with Schulich teaching, it doesn't have to be me, it's me plus, plus, plus. That was a huge savior for me, and that's what we coach to now, and it's an eye-opener for most people because, as you did mention, so many of us in business suffer from that, differing levels of degrees, but we all have it to a certain degree.
Certainly. So, Daniel, I mean, you got 2 degrees, you couldn't find a job, you landed in financial advising, you achieved a level of mastery, right? Breaking through that imposter syndrome, becoming a student of your ICP and you know, getting your next PhD in that, we could say, and you landed in Schulich. You spent 2 decades at Schulich. I mean, what caused the transition from that? I mean, you're in coaching now, working with professional financial advisors. What caused that shift?
Right. So I was still working in the industry while teaching. And over the years, I started to really think, because I got into the branch management level, I was hiring and training and coaching advisors to my own branch. And I just thought at some point, I want to be more entrepreneurial. I want to run the whole show. And I'd set a timeline for when I would end with being a licensed advisor, manager, and actually set up my own shop as a coach. Luckily, I had a lot of help with that with my business partner, Tina Karthagaser, who's our operations director, in that she came with me. So we started Advice to Advisors in 2018, which really was a pretty good start for us until we ran into COVID, of course.
Naturally. So, I mean, with everything said, you, perhaps could we say that you were who your ICP is today, someone who in the financial space who wants to grow, who wants to reinvest in themselves, and maybe they're facing challenges that they're having issues solving on their own?
I hadn't thought of it quite like that, but that's a really good way to put it. Yes, we coach exclusively to financial advisors who are looking for growth. And that might sound like, well, everybody's looking for growth, but that's just not the case. A huge percentage of financial advisors, like any other profession, are quite comfortable with where they are. They're not necessarily looking for dramatic growth, but we want to work with the ones that do want growth and whatever growth means to them. But it has to be always moving forward. They have to have a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. So they've got to be open, they've got to be willing, and they've got to do the work, because it is a lot of work. But what we see is fabulous results coming out of that work.
Incredible. So you're mentioning growth mindset, you're mentioning people who want to achieve growth in a measurable way, however is meaningful for them. How the heck do you even target these people? I mean, most people, as you said, or many people all across all industries are just, comfortable with where they're at. Maybe they want a little bit more, but they're not really willing to push themselves to that point. So what's your approach for actually finding these people who what you do, or who will resonate most with what it is that you do and can help them achieve?
Yeah, and what we do is a lot of what we actually teach and coach to. We're out there. We're out in the marketplace, as it were. We're on social media. I do a lot of keynote speaking within the industry. I do a lot of writing. So I'm out there. We get referrals and introductions, of course, which we're always pushing for our advisors to work towards. So it's really being out there. Social media has made it much easier to be recognized. You mentioned coaching Brazil. Well, that came about, no doubt, through social media. Just the fact that they saw my first book. And it's interesting, I hadn't even realized that a magazine in the US had rated my book as one of the top 10 books that financial advisors needed to read in, I think it was 2018. And somebody in Brazil at BTG, the biggest investment bank there, saw that and invited me to come down to Sao Paulo in 2020 to do a keynote to their top advisors. So it's getting out there, being seen, but again, you've got to be seen in ways that you can't limit it to yourself, and that's where social media really can play a great part.
That's incredible. As you're saying, social media can play a great part in anyone's practice, right? Just with the type of reach that you can achieve through that as well. Consultants, individual consultants, firms, franchises. Who is it that you really help in this way?
Yeah, it's all of the above. We do direct one-on-one coaching with individual advisors who want that personal approach. We have programs that we teach in-house to firms for their advisors on what we call our Master Series in Wealth Management, which is kind of the financial planning in a box. We teach a Micro-MBA in estate planning, which covers estate and legacy planning. So we do that in-house. We also teach to individual advisors right across the country, all virtually now. And again, that's thanks to COVID.
Amazing. Yeah, incredible. Now, with what you're saying here, it sounds like you have a pretty good reach or a pretty far reach. I mean, heck, all the way down to Brazil there, right? You work with a number of different people. And from who it is you work with, right, people pursuing high growth or in growth mode, of course, I would assume that you wouldn't target those people unless that was a value that you had yourself, right? Even from knowing what your past is like, you're on a constant growth trajectory. So tell us a little bit about what's next for advice to advisors. How is it that you're living true to that?
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's not even as though we have to think what's the next growth opportunity, because it's foisted upon us in a lot of ways. You know, AI itself has demanded that we up our game and that we move along with what's happening in technology. You know, with COVID, when it hit, I just come back from Sao Paulo, flown into Vancouver. Within 2 days, we were in Detroit coaching and training a firm. And within 2 days back of that, we were shut down with COVID. So from flying, moving, doing virtually everything live, other than individual coaching, we were doing virtually at the time. But most of our programs were live, and the keynotes were all live. And that shutdown, that immediate shutdown, was potentially catastrophic for our business. And luckily, and I can't take any of the accolades for this, but Tina, my partner, because of her background in technology, she had us shifted. We were in the midst of a coaching program, a group coaching. They all drove or flew in to Toronto, where we were training at the time, and that was shut down mid-course, an 8-session course. It was shut down. Thursday morning, the course happened. The very next Thursday, we were shut down, and Tina had us set up virtually, which was phenomenal, and that's just what transpired thereafter. So what we're seeing, everything we do, other than we're back to keynotes, a lot more live keynotes, which I love. The in-person, it's hard to beat. I mean, virtual doesn't quite do it. Having said that, I can't tell you how many individuals we've coached and I've never met them personally. What's interesting is we're finally getting the opportunity when we do keynotes and that, flying across, different parts of the country, we're actually getting to meet some of the people that we coached for a couple of years, some upwards of 5 years. We're now meeting them live finally, which is nice. But yeah, we had to keep moving forward. And now the AI, what do we do with that? It's interesting, but it's also fun because that just adds to the opportunities. You have to learn it. You have to get through it. But I think, and it's not just in the financial world, but I think industries right across the span of business have to recognize that not everybody is as comfortable, capable of learning it as others. And much like Tina can learn it faster than I can learn it, at least she can teach me and then I can adapt to it. But you just have to dip your toes, to get started. Once you're started, once you're in, everything gets a little easier. And what I've found is that I use AI to tell me how to use AI and which AI to use. So it's a learning process that feeds itself in a way.
Daniel, there's something really interesting you said there a minute ago that I'd love to tie into what we're chatting about right now. Now, you said something like, even without intentionally focusing on or planning for growth, as long as you're doing the right things to make changes at the right time, growth might happen, right? So, and of course, I put that into my own words, but you mentioned COVID, right? Being forced to move online, but also adapting to that changing time, right? Making the pivots and the changes necessary, even if the goal isn't growth, even if it is just to, I suppose, survive at times, but adapt. to stay where you are in the market or perhaps move further ahead. You can almost achieve growth just by making the right changes at the right time, even if the goal isn't, to 10x your operations. It's a really deep insight.
Yeah, and it's not as though we didn't have, we do our annual planning, our growth planning. We've always done that, but things happen. COVID happened, AI happened, other things happen. And sometimes you've got to go on the defense. Other times it leads you right into an offense that is unbelievable and opportunistic. So yeah, you've got to be adaptable. There's no doubt about it, especially today, you've got to be adaptable.
Incredible. And, can you tell us a little bit more about, what it is now you're doing to adapt with AI? You mentioned a few things there, right? But when we're looking at the changing times, I think there's a lot of challenges within the financial services market all across the board, right? One of them being competition, right? Being able to actually stand out in the market and differentiate yourself. I know that you do a lot with marketing, right? And of course, you're already differentiated with the approach that you take, but how is it now that you're combining these adaptation or the pivots that you're making with AI to continue giving yourself an advantage when it comes to differentiation?
Yeah, good question. And as I mentioned before, back in Shuluk, when I started putting everything into processes, that was all on the technical side, tax, estate, retirement planning. We also do it on the marketing side, and we have an overall process that we use with advisors, which is our client acquisition and retention process. So it goes right from preparation, where you are, where your mindset is, what your business structure looks like, who your ideal client is, what your unique value proposition. It starts there, goes right through onboarding the new client and then servicing that client. And we've always used that as a step-by-step play to help advisors on, first of all, visualizing where they are. And this was something I was taught when I got into the industry, which I think has been lost in a lot of instances because there's not as much training of new financial advisors at the firm level because there's so many more teams versus individual advisors these days. But we go back to that route because you have to know your roadmap. But with AI now, how we're adapting to AI is we're taking that client acquisition and retention process and we're looking at every step along the way, that initial, the marketing and the prospecting, and we discern those two. We don't think they're the same thing. Then all the technical aspects of the business, the onboarding, the client servicing, and we're saying, where does I fit into each and every step? Or does it? Is there a spot for it? And what we're finding is pretty much every step of the way, you can grab AI, some form of AI, and utilize it to help you. You can help lead generation, marketing. Certainly, those are the areas that advisors are more aware of. I don't know about comfortable, but getting more comfortable with content creation. You're seeing more of that on social media. You can look at it, and unfortunately, you can see where a lot of that is AI driven and created. Little forms of plagiarism as it is, but at least it's getting people to do things that they might not have been comfortable. I do it all the time now. If I say I'm putting together a presentation, I'll ask, and this is where I get very specific. I need the research. Tell me the research that says what the top 10 points of whatever my topic is. I've made the mistake of just saying, what are the top 10 points or what do advisors want or whatever. And unless I ask for that research to back it up, I don't use it any longer because AI isn't perfect by any means.
No, not yet.
Be careful what you ask.
I don't know if we'll get to where it's perfect, but it's definitely moving at a pretty quick pace to get better than it is now. You mentioned something there about discomfort. I think when in terms of making changes and adopting to those changes as well. Right, I think that plagues humanity, just that fear of discomfort. And I'm kind of curious, if we're looking at the clients that you work with, right, and providing them with advice around these changes and direction, given your experience with some pretty major industry shifts, pivots, and just changes in direction across your professional career, how are you applying the lessons that you learned through your own pivots to help advisors navigate AI, without panic, perhaps?
Yeah, that's a lot to unpack. There's so much, that we do that we think is basic, right from the beginning. That's student of the business. You've got to be a student of the business. You need to know who your ideal client is. You need to know, you need to write, and you need to live your unique value proposition. So those are basics. Having said that, it's not what most of the industry works to, because it's not how the industry has trained. It's always been, get who you can initially. But my belief is I want to start where I need to end. So if I've got a picture of where I want to be in the future, and this certainly isn't my idea, it's been written, many books have been written about that, but if I can see a future that I like, I should start living it now. And AI comes into that a lot. So if I know who I want to target as my ideal client, how do I market to them? What do I have to do that's going to help me stand out from the competition? AI can help that in so many ways. The lead generation, the marketing, how you get your content creation established and then out there, video tools, all of that now makes what I consider the basics, but the industry doesn't yet. It makes it all easier if you can see it, follow it through. And again, that's where our client acquisition and retention process, that's a roadmap. And it's adaptable to any advisor, so they can fill it in how they want, but it allows them to see their future and then start picking the tools that will help them make it easier, save time, save money in a lot of, I know a lot of advisors think, this all costs money. Well, it doesn't actually. There is a lot of free AI out there that you can utilize. Certainly there's the paid AI for financial planners. They've got their software, which is really AI, and there's great and there's not as great. So you can get free, you can get highly expensive software out there as well. But there's so much available to make our industry great, to make the advisors in the industry great. It's tapping into it and knowing how to use it. And again, dip your toes if you're not into it yet. Firms are moving quickly and they're adapting, but a lot of that is back end, back office, and not all of it touches the advisor directly. But having said that, advisors are very aware of the firms that are out of touch versus those that are at the forefront. And when you've got top producers, they're looking at that if they're thinking of making a move. So at the firm level, you can't be behind the game. You can't be dipping your toes. You're losing the game, or, in some instances, you've lost the game.
Daniel, I want to thank you so much for your time on the Growth Shift today and sharing, your story, your lessons, and your insights with the audience. If there was one piece of parting advice, one lesson that you learned from your experience, from the summation of your experience, that you could leave with other business leaders or financial advisors who want to grow into that leadership role as well, what would that lesson or that experience be?
Great question. One thing we've always said to advisors, and one of the big things in my industry is, what is AI going to do? Like, are they wiping us out? Will there be no need for financial advisors? And I think it's almost ridiculous to the point of, will we not need doctors any longer? And I always go back to what I've always said to advisors, there's different levels that you can get to if you're giving advice. There's information. Information is now free. It's easy to attain. Anybody can get it. Then there's knowledge. Knowledge is being able to take and apply that information to what somebody needs. But in my mind, the top is wisdom. And that's where you take that knowledge and not just apply it, but you apply it in a way that makes people comfortable, that they're not only willing to do it, but they want to do what you're recommending because you've been able to show empathy. They trust what you're saying because of that empathy, because of the knowledge turned into the actual level, that it gets to the point where you're really looking at wisdom. Everybody, if you're going to stay where you want to stay or keep moving forward, you've got to go through the information, the knowledge, get to the wisdom, sell your wisdom. And in virtually any profession, I think that's going to keep you in play for a lot longer than most fearmongers worry about when it comes to AI.
Fantastic. Ultimately, there's only two things we can control, right? It comes down to our attitude and our actions. So if you're not feeling well, take the actions to gain the insights, the knowledge, and gain the wisdom that will put you in that position eventually. So
So
I love that.
true.
I love that. Daniel, for any of our listeners who might like to reach out to continue the conversation or to perhaps even look into working with Advice to Advisors, what would be the best way to find you?
Sure, just go to advice2advisors.com, our website, and contact us through there. I'd love to hear from any advisor that is looking to continue to grow.
Thanks again for joining the Growth Shift today.
Thanks very much, David.
And that's a wrap on another episode of The Growth Shift. If this conversation sparked something for you, whether it's a new perspective on failure, a strategy you want to try, or just the reminder that every setback can become a setup for something bigger, hit that subscribe button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, the leaders who thrive aren't the ones who avoid change. They're the ones who shift strategically through it. If you're ready to build the systems that help you grow without the chaos, head over to valentix.io. We help businesses like yours scale smarter, not harder. I'm David Zylstra, and I'll see you in the next shift.